A disability is something that has a major impact on your life.
Every disability is different.
And it's never the same thing for two people. I am blind in my right eye totally and partially sighted in my left eye.
I was 18 years old. We were traveling way too fast on a gravel road. Broke my neck, my back.
My Asperger's syndrome and my cerebral palsy.
I have anxiety and depression. People would have no idea just talking to me.
Being independent means different things to different people.
I want to live in my own house. I want to pay my own bills.
Live independently and not rely on other people.
When someone is not able to live as independently as they can, it does have a detrimental effect on people's physical and mental well-being.
It's no complicated thing. It's just that people with disabilities want to be included.
Plenty of people get stuck in ruts when they feel like they can't overcome something in their life. That's where LIFTT comes in.
Living independently for today and tomorrow. LIFTT. We help people of all ages and all types of disabilities find the resources or acquire the skills to live as independently as possible.
We serve the southeastern 18 counties here at the Billings office. We have a variety of things that we offer. We can help with grant funding for adaptive equipment.
Maybe a home modification so they're able to access their home. We help people to find that funding.
Helping people apply for Social Security benefits.
Medicaid, Medicare, housing.
They have a peer support group. Peer support, I think, is key.
Sharing life experiences is one of the most powerful things to help people who might be new to disability, who might be struggling with their disability.
Youth transitions is kids that are transitioning out of high school. They need to learn those adulting skills. It might be rent an apartment, learn how to grocery shop, budgeting.
Help someone advocate for themselves in a school or an employment setting. One of our biggest strengths is providing folks with information and referral. If we can't help you, we hope to know who can.
A lot of times we'll have a potential consumer call in and they think that they just have one need, and it turns out that we end up finding 3 or 4 things we can actually do for them.
You can just come in and say, hey, I feel like I have this going on. Can you help me? And we can, which is so cool to me. I love that.
Most of us on staff at LIFTT have identified ourselves as having one or more disabilities. That is helpful in many cases.
It's easier to empathize with someone when you yourself have struggled with a disability.
This is what we specialize in. This is who we are, and this is what we do.
And it costs nothing to go to LIFTT. It's a nonprofit organization and they're there to help.
Somebody that was a consumer that was working with LIFTT was asked to do an art project. He visualized that the balloon helps to lift people up. And then it became the logo, and it's stuck.
There's been success on all kinds of levels.
It's really rewarding to have a consumer go, hey, I was able to do this by myself today.
We want people to live their best life as independent as possible.
Live as everyone else in society and live as a part of society, not apart from society.
Everybody needs help. Sometimes you just need a little more help, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay.
There's plenty of life to live still, and there's a way you can do it. Keep chipping away at it, little by little by little.
Knowledge is power. Let's share it, for crying out loud.
Send us an email, give us a call. We'll do our best to help.
We can definitely help figure out what your needs are and get started on that. We're one of many steps in the path to independence, and we're happy to be serving people here in the community.
Good day and welcome to Living Well in Montana. Living Well in Montana is a program of living independently for today and tomorrow, or LIFT, L-I-F-T-T as we call ourselves. LIFT is what is known as a Center for Independent Living, meaning we are a center for disability resources and advocacies. We serve an 18-county area across southeastern and south central Montana, from the North Dakota border at Richland County, south to Baker, and west all the way to Columbus and Stillwater County. For more information about LIFT, I encourage you to either visit our website at lift.org, or you can give one of our offices a call. Our Billings office can be reached at 406-294-5186. Wait a minute, that's my direct line. 406-259-5181 will get you the reception at the Billings office. And our Glendive office can be reached at 406-948-8500. And again, we're online at lift.org. My name is Jed Barton, and I am a Public Relations and Government Affairs Specialist with LIFT, and it is my pleasure to be the host of today's Living Well. And our guest today is Pam Bean. Pam is the Executive Director of Fair Housing Montana, or Montana Fair Housing, and they are based out of Butte, but they serve statewide. Pam, welcome. I wonder if we could start with just a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what Montana Fair Housing is.
Hello, Jed. Thanks for having us in. I've been with Montana Fair Housing since 1994, so quite a long time. Prior to that, I worked with folks with mental illnesses and worked with organizations in Helena to organize tenants groups to bring about change at their sites and in policy. Montana Fair Housing is a nonprofit, and our focus and our mission is on addressing discrimination in Montana through outreach, education, dispute resolution, and when necessary, enforcement. We do a lot of events like this. Last year, we participated in or coordinated 63 workshops, presentations, media events, working with folks like LIFT, public events and public presentations. So we do a lot to try to educate consumers and also housing providers. And in fact, last year, over 13% of the calls we received were from housing providers, trying to get information so that they could do the right thing. They might not always like it, but they wanted to comply with the law. Dispute resolutions, we did over 40 last year, and those are events that take place pre-filing of a complaint with Department of Housing and Urban Development and or the Montana Human Rights Bureau or in court. So those involved households that were renting, as well as households in homeowners associations. And we worked with households that were needing reasonable accommodations or modifications for folks with disabilities so that they can live independently. We worked with households that included survivors of domestic violence and households including people of color who felt there potentially was discriminatory activity taking place because of their national origin or race. So we worked with both parties to resolve those issues, and that encourages and guarantees housing stability. We also worked with developers who were constructing multifamily housing and trying to uh, make sure, especially in a difficult terrain, they were making the routes throughout the complexes as accessible as possible. So those are very good activities to try and keep folks living independently and ensure housing stability, because if your housing's not stable, it's tough to pursue education, pursue medical care, uh, pursue work, shopping opportunities, etc. And then finally, we engage in investigation and enforcement of the civil rights laws as those relate to housing. And last year, we secured $28,000 in settlement for persons who had experienced discrimination. And the agreements included things like training for the housing providers, development and implementation and distribution of non-discrimination policies, things like that. So we have a wide variety of services to try and secure housing stability and secure housing products, whether it's insurance, appraisal, mortgage, or rental, sales. Um, Anybody that's wanting information about that, we'll provide it and we'll support them in complying with the law or support potential victims of discrimination as well.
Okay.
And our services at this time are without cost.
Okay. So again, you talk about all the different types of housing in the state and all of the types of different discrimination you see or see as potential and try to head off. I was wondering if there's anything in particular on the disability side, particularly that you guys see regularly and that you'd like to take the opportunity to talk about and maybe do some education.
Thank you. The bulk of the calls that we get, or emails or walk-ins, etc., contacts that we get every year are for and from persons with disabilities. Montana is an aging population. We have a large percentage of veterans. We have markets and industries that, like timber and mining, ag, where people can acquire disabilities through injury, etc. So over 50% of the work we do is geared towards assisting households with disabilities or providing information to housing providers about coverages for people with disabilities. The most common calls that we get are in regards to reasonable accommodations or reasonable modifications. So accommodations is a waiver to a policy or a procedure so that somebody can be lease compliant or rule compliant, application compliant, whatever the process is that's involved. Modifications involve structural changes that might need to be made for somebody with mobility impairment. Somebody using a wheelchair might need a ramp, or wider doorways, that type of thing. The most common call we probably get is accommodations for persons needing assistance animals for therapeutic reasons, emotional support, companionship, something like that. One of the concerns that we have is the rising number of people who have multiple assistance animals. And that I'd like to remind folks there has to be a relationship between the need of every animal and your disability. And the need has to be different for every animal. Otherwise, one animal could meet your needs. I'm not saying that multiple animals aren't needed at times, but when you start getting into, 9 ferrets or 32 geckos or something like that,
And again,
it's really difficult for us to jump on arguing those instances.
And the Americans with Disability Act is pretty specific about, at least in terms of what a service animal is, a dog or a miniature horse that performs a designated task for the person with disabilities or on behalf of the person with disabilities. But yeah, that emotional companion support animal is kind of a gray area.
Well, it's not so much a gray area. The ADA doesn't cover it, and the ADA isn't very useful when we're talking about dwelling units. We would look at the Federal Fair Housing Act, the Montana Human Rights Act, or Section 504 of the Rehab Act if you're getting federal funds at the property. Service animals, I think it's clearer and easier for us and a housing provider to say, that person's blind. I can see the need for the service animal, or in a wheelchair to pick up things and open doors, etc. But when it comes to hidden disabilities is where the struggle is. And animals can be great for people with disabilities of all types because there's often, if nothing else, isolation. And an animal can help reduce that isolation, but it also can be distracting for certain symptoms to help you cope better, provide comfort when you're struggling with coping with an event. There's all kinds of benefits, but the healthcare provider and the person who's requesting the animal need to be clear about what symptoms arising from the disability will be addressed by having this animal present in the home.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Seems, very reasonable. Aside from the animal issue, and I know that that's a lot of what you get, and again, we get a fair amount of that on the same sort of wavelength here at LIFTT, people asking for information, referral about, service and companion animals. In terms of the physical modifications, did we, when I first started on this job, we would line up a grant for somebody to, that this foundation was going to build a ramp or a shower modification, and we still couldn't get the landlord on board. It wasn't going to cost him or her a dime. But you know, it's
So,
obviously their property and they need to give
mhm,
permission. Again, it's been a while since I've worked a home modification case personally, so I don't know whether we're still seeing that here at LIFTT. But do you see that where even when we're not talking about trying to, um, you know, force the landlord to make an accommodation out of their own pocket or out of the rent or whatever, that there's
mhm,
resistance?
we do. Not as much, as 10, 15 years ago, but it still arises. And I would say that it's probably increasing in frequency again in the last year. I've had housing providers, especially at homeowners associations, say we don't want a ramp put in here because the place will start looking like a nursing home. Comments like that. And obviously, if
Right.
the household is paying for the modifications, it's pretty difficult for a housing provider to push back too much,
Yeah.
because they can they can allow the modifications, but they can also request that any modifications that would interfere with the use of the unit by a following household without that disability, they can require they put the money in an interest-bearing account to retrofit it. So, but things on the exterior like ramps or
Right.
making a path between buildings accessible, those can't be asked to be changed. But
Yeah.
for example, if somebody's lowered kitchen counters or put in a roll-in shower, they could ask that those be retrofitted if the housing provider wanted it to. But if
And
they
that,
widen doors inside, they couldn't request that those be put back to
right.
the original 28-inch doors because following households are probably thrilled with wider doors. So,
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say is that I think landlords, and you're even saying homeowners associations,
mhm,
um
mhm,
underestimate the utility and the sort of
mhm,
transferability of
mhm,
some of these features that,
yep,
they make at one level, they make a property
mhm,
more desirable. I know there are ifs, ands, or buts in every
mhm,
situation, but you know,
yeah.
if I'm out there looking at a home, I'm not going to turn away from it because it has a ramp, because again, I know someday I might need that ramp. Even if
Or you have friends that have
exactly.
limitations,
The,
or your mom or something. The other thing about ramps is that households with young kids especially like ramps for the
yep,
strollers and the wagons, that type of thing. It's
yep,
just not a devaluing project.
exactly. So we've got about 4.5 minutes here. Um, and let's talk a little bit about how traditionally Montana Fair Housing has been funded and what has happened since February.
Uh, uh, Actually, in 1994, when I was hired, it was because Montana Fair Housing got their first federal grant and expanded staff. And off and on since that time, the organization has gotten a federal grant. Montana Fair Housing was awarded last year a 3-year grant that commenced on May 19th, 425,000 a year, to do the work we do, hire some more staff, etc. On February 27th, 2025. At 7:27 p.m., I checked my email one more time before quitting work for the night. I'm obviously not a 9 to 5er. And an email came in from Department of Housing and Urban Development with an attached letter that stated, at the direction of Doge and the president, our grant had been immediately rescinded. We were not to perform any more work on the grant and to submit a closeout report immediately. I at first thought it was like spam or something, and then started getting emails in from other groups. In all, I think it was 78 groups lost grants across the nation. So the rest of this year's grant and the additional 2 years of funding is a big hit for us. And the groups got together and we actually appealed the decision, and the courts put a temporary restraining order on HUD and Doge. The grant was re-implemented, and we got one more drawdown before the upper court overturned the TRO and placed it back on. So it's been a whirlwind. We don't know if we have funding or not. How do we've had to lay off some staff, cease a number of the projects that we were working on. April was Fair Housing Month, and we had some events planned and canceled some of those. It's just been very frustrating. And it's, like I said, as an executive director, very hard to do any planning as far as so that the grant was cut February 27th. The following week, we were hiring 2 more staff. So I even had to call those folks and say, sorry. And how do you hire people when you don't know from month to month whether you're going to have that funding or not? So, we're doing some fundraising, looking at some foundation grants to augment our budget and hopefully can stabilize that way.
Well, Pam, I hate to cut you off there, but we are close to being out of time. If people want to find out more about Montana Fair Housing, you have a website?
Yes, montanafairhousing.org.
And what's the phone number for folks to reach out if they have a question?
406-782-2573. And the email on the website will come to me as well.
Great.
So you can email from there.
Great. Again, Pam Bean is the Executive Director of Montana Fair Housing. We wish you the best of luck as you navigate your bit of fiscal uncertainty. You've certainly been a good partner to LIFTT over the years, and we're pulling for you. This has been
And we're pulling for you as well.
Thank you. This has been Living Well in Montana, a program of living independently for today and tomorrow, or LIFTT. You can reach LIFTT on the web at LIFTT.org or by phone at 406-259-5181 in Billings or 406-948-8500 in Glendive. I'm Jed Barton. Everyone have a great day. Thank you.